Yo, what's good guys? So I am back with another video. This time I'm going to be doing an in-depth review of Grid 2019, which obviously is coming out on October 11th for the standard edition. So today the overall question is, should you buy Grid 2019? And we'll get to that towards the end of the video when we have kind of a final decision made, but I want to go over a lot of different points in Grid 2019, a lot of different little aspects about it that may be game breaking or may actually help you decide to buy the game at the end of the day. So real quick, I want to tell you a few things about Grid in case you are new to the franchise or you don't really know much about it. Grid is developed by Codemasters, who have also developed games like F1 and Dirt. Personally, I would say Grid 2019 feels like a pretty good mixture of Gran Turismo and Forza. It doesn't focus too much specifically on the simulation racing side of things, but it also isn't too arcadey. It's a nice mixture of both. In Grid 2019, there's about 80 different courses that you can race on. I would say after a little while of racing on most of these courses, you kind of start to feel like you've seen everything, and they also have different variants of when you would be racing on the track, like morning, dusk, afternoon, night, day, whatever you want. There's a lot of different options there, and I will say the sky looks pretty nice, especially when you're racing when it is sunset. Now moving on to the damage models, I would say that this is something that Codemasters is definitely proud of with Grid 2019, in that the damage models are very accurate, and they're a kind of damage model that I haven't seen in any kind of racing game as of lately. I would say it's extremely detailed. For instance, your brake lights could get shattered, body panels will fall off, something like the hood will fly up into the air, or your bumper will fall off, or your hood will be flapping while you're racing, or your trunk, or whatever the case is. And I think Codemasters did a very exceptional job when it came to the damage models in this game. Moving on to vehicle detail, when the hood falls off, you can clearly see the engine bay of the car that you are in, which I will say is very detailed. If you take a look at the R32's engine bay when you've lost the hood, you can see the exposed single turbo as well as the RB, and things seem to be extremely photorealistic when it comes to the accuracy of that engine bay, and I think that that is a really cool feature, because of course you have these games that the engine bay is of course pretty accurate, but if you're looking at something like Forza compared to Grid, I would much rather take Grid's engine bay over something like Forza's, because Forza just kind of seems like a cookie cutter kind of thing, whereas Grid's, it seems very realistic. Let's talk about the car sounds, because I know a lot of people are very concerned about car sounds when it comes to racing games. A lot of people didn't like how a lot of the cars sound in Forza Horizon 4, for example, and I will say the car sounds in this game are exceptional. I do think that they are very accurate. However, I have noticed with a few cars they do sound a little bit suppressed, maybe a little bit too quiet, but they do sound so much better, especially with the tuner cars. You just get that tuner vibe when you're racing, when you're full throttle, and I absolutely love that feeling of being able to hear maybe that RB with the single turbo or the RX-7 with the rotary. It just sounds so good, and I love the car sounds in this game. So one thing that is very important when it comes to racing games is the handling model. Obviously, you've got Gran Turismo, who focuses on the handling model and having a more realistic side of things, and then you have Forza, which is a little bit of simulation, but it focuses more on the controller players, and it doesn't necessarily feel extremely realistic, but it feels realistic enough. However, in Grid, I will say that it does feel a lot more arcadey, but you can feel a little bit of simulation handling in this game, and I think that that's super cool. Now, it's not too much simulation, it's not too arcadey. It is a pretty good balance when it comes to being arcadey and having that little bit of simulation in there. I will say, if you're coming from something like Forza, it will take a little bit of time to get used to, and if you're coming from something like Gran Turismo, at least from what I've heard from a few different people, it's not going to be as much of a learning curve as if you were coming from Forza. I haven't played Gran Turismo myself, so I can't really compare and contrast the handling models of each game, but I have heard that there's a smaller learning curve when it comes to getting used to how this game handles and when you're driving a car if you've come from Gran Turismo. Now moving on to customization, which is kind of a big deal because a lot of people come to a car game in the first place so that they can customize their cars, maybe check out a mod that they'd want to add to their car in real life, or they could just customize their car to make it suit them a lot better. And I will say, in this game, the customization is very limited. As far as customization goes, there's no performance mods. You can't add any performance mods like suspension or an upgraded engine or whatever the case may be, but there is a very simple tuning mechanic that uses sliders that you can move either 2 to the right or 2 to the left. I will say this tuning mechanic does make a noticeable difference in game, However, it is the only kind of performance difference that you can make to your car, which is honestly very unfortunate. I would have loved to see a lot more customization as far as even something as simple as adding rims, or maybe a certain kind of suspension to make your car lower, maybe some exhaust, something like that, something to just make the car more you, if that makes sense. You can still make your car look different enough from the other cars in the race to kind of differentiate who you are compared to the other drivers. However, that is very limited as well. When you change the appearance of your car, the only thing you can do in Grid is you can change the color combinations of liveries, and there's about 200 or so different liveries for most of the cars, so you have a lot of variants to choose from. And like I said, you can change the color combinations on these cars, so you can make it a little bit more of what you would like for that car to look like. However, that only goes so far. There also is no livery editor in the game, which is also kind of another unfortunate thing. I know there's a lot of people, especially with Forza, who make like different designs for their cars, and it really sucks because it would add a little bit more of that you factor. It's all about you, you know, you're making your car more you, if that makes sense. So let's quickly talk about the career. Like, the progression path is very nice, and you can choose where you want to start as far as like what class you want to race in, which I think is really cool because you can choose what kind of car you start off in. Say you just hop on the game and you want to race with tuners specifically, you can choose that tuner class and you can do some races in that tuner class. Or say maybe you want to race in some like F1 cars, you can choose something like the Fernando Alonso Challenge, which is mostly F1 type races, or there's something like NASCAR races where you can take stock cars. I think that is super cool. You can kind of choose just where you want to start. It doesn't limit you to what you can do when you play the career mode. Moving on to multiplayer, there is a couple of different things about multiplayer that I really like that Grid has done that I've never seen before, especially out of a racing game. One of them being, instead of waiting in a traditional lobby where you can just see the players you'll be racing against, Grid puts you in a demolition derby skirmish while you wait for the game to start. I think this is a perfect way to start the lobbies out, hang out with your friends, try and run into them and just try and destroy their cars, and just mess around right before the race starts or whatever you're doing starts. And personally, I think that idea is very clever. Like I said, I've never seen a racing game do that before, and I think that's really cool. Just to mention a few other little features, when you're in a race, you can create a nemesis when you hit or bump an opponent too many times, and they will tend to be more aggressive towards you in the sense that they will try to maybe block you or spin you out or try to push you into a wall or maybe make you lose a few positions. Now, along with that, you can also hire a teammate or an ally who can help block for you to help you gain some positions or help you even win the race sometimes. They'll try and help you out in the race, and each of these teammates and different nemesis have different personalities. I believe there's over 400 different personalities in Grid, and they all race differently. And I think that this is a really cool feature because when you're racing in career mode, for instance, each driver has their own characteristics and they will race differently, so the race doesn't necessarily revolve around the player specifically like most racing games today. There's so many different things that happen during a race, and this is something that Codemasters is proud of and specifically show off, especially starting you out during a crash scene in the prologue bit of the game when you're racing in the stock car and you have to try to avoid a crash. So moving on to some concerns that I have for this game, the main one is longevity. I haven't played much of the career mode, but I have seen quite a bit of gameplay from it, and I am concerned of what will happen to the game once most players do complete the career mode. And this is kind of a similar thing to, say, for instance, the Lego expansion that came out for Forza Horizon 4. Once all the players got all those bricks that you could get, there wasn't really much to do after that as far as progressing the storyline goes, and the expansion kind of died off. Not really many people cared about it anymore, and not really many people play it anymore. And I worry the same thing would happen to Grid, because Grid does have a lot of potential. There's a lot of things that they could do and change, and a lot of things that they've already implemented and added to this game that make it a very unique game, and one that could be very successful, a lot more than it already is. And I have seen tweets from people like Super GT and Shiny Odd on Twitter saying that it reminds them of Dirt and Dirt 2, where you'd play the game and then there would just be nothing left to do. Obviously, you have multiplayer where you can play with your friends and have a good time and whatnot, but that only goes so far. You can't really keep a game alive with multiplayer specifically, at least not in the racing game genre. Sure, you'll have your community there who will still play on multiplayer and still try to go for record lap times or whatever the case may be, but I will say that a majority of people will stop playing if there's only so much to do and they're not as drawn into the game and it doesn't keep them coming back. I am also concerned about the customization, considering that there is no performance or visual customizations aside from changing the color combinations of the pre-made liveries. And like I said, customization is one of the biggest factors when it comes to people buying a racing game, and I think the fact that Grid doesn't really have much customization as far as performance or visual goes is definitely going to limit how many people play the game or even how many people buy the game in the first place. There is also no photo mode, which takes out a big chunk of the community, because I know there's a lot of people who will go into racing games, especially a lot of racing games now today, where you can't really tell if it's real or not, and people will go in and take pictures. However, in Grid, there's no photo mode, which is very unfortunate because it makes my life a little bit harder, because it's a little bit harder to make thumbnails then, which is unfortunate. So if anyone from Codemasters does happen to come across this video, I will say that one feature that I would really like to see out of Grid, if there's improvements to be made on the game, is definitely adding a photo mode if possible. That would just bring in a huge community of racing game enthusiasts as well as photographers who focus specifically on that kind of thing in these racing games. So I would say a photo mode is definitely needed for something like this, as I do believe some of the pictures would look very good, especially when you're on the Okutama circuit and maybe an R32. Something like that would just be a perfect photo op, and the fact that there's no way to take a picture kind of just makes it a little bit more unfortunate. To go over prices real quick before you do make your decision of if you should or shouldn't buy Grid 2019, there is the standard edition, which is $59.99 US, and the ultimate edition, which is $79.99 US, which includes a VIP, which gives you more money from races, and it also comes with other little exclusive goodies. Now finally, to close this off, to answer the big question of the day, should you buy Grid 2019? Personally, I would say yes. It is a very fun game, like I said, especially if you have friends to play it with. However, if you don't really have anyone to play it with or don't have anyone that has the game, then I will say the game will only do you for so long. Once you complete the career mode, there's really no reason to come back unless, like I said, you have those people to hop online with and make funny little challenges with, or just hang out with and maybe play in Demolition Derby and destroy each other's cars or something like that. But I will say, if you're playing this game by yourself and you don't really have many people to play it with, I would say take my concerns into consideration, like longevity, the customization, and the no photo mode. Those are really big things when it comes to a racing game. However, Grid does still have the fundamentals of being a racing game, as far as having that track racing, having a little bit of fun with Demolition Derby, and just kind of doing what you want to for the most part. And if you're looking for something new, something to kind of refresh how you feel about racing games right now, I would say Grid is definitely the way to go. And if there's anything that I missed or any questions that you guys have before you maybe make the decision of whether you should or should not buy Grid 2019, leave a comment down below and I will try my absolute best to try and answer it for you and help you maybe decide a little bit easier. Also, if you are new around here, I would greatly appreciate it if you would consider clicking the subscribe button and joining this awesome family that we have here. And I would also suggest going in the description and following me on my other social medias, where I often post all kinds of different things. So go follow me, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, links all in the description. So I hope to see you there. My name is Stonix. Don't forget, stay strong and just keep pushing forward. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.